All right, so let's go ahead and get started today. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, How to Drive More Pipeline in 2021 with ABM. My name is Sesame Mish, and I'm the Growth Marketing Director at Intellimize. We automatically optimize each buyer's path on the website to drive more conversions. And we do this by enabling marketers with our machine learning to automatically test an unlimited number of ideas on their site, and at the same time, personalize their site for each individual visitor. Jesse?
Yeah, thanks, Sesame. My name is Jesse Rao. I'm the head of growth marketing over here at G2. And to put it simply on kind of what G2 is, we're the world's largest tech marketplace where businesses can discover, review, and then also manage the technology they need to own or sell and fully reach their potential. And then I think Mark.
Yep, and my name is Mark Huber. I'm a director of growth at Metadata. For those of you who aren't familiar with Metadata, we're a demand generation platform that lets you run highly targeted campaigns across paid social and display, and then lets them self-optimize based on what's driving real business outcomes like opportunity generation and revenue generation. Sweet, I'll kick things off then and jump right in. So before we get started, this is one of my favorite things to talk about. It's just account-based marketing and ABM. There are probably a million different definitions floating out there, and I would say the majority of them I don't like. So what we want to do before we get any further is talk through what ABM is not. We'll get into what ABM is, and then that way we all have kind of a baseline understanding. We're all using that same definition. So a few things, and number one, I think, is how many people still describe ABM, but ABM is not a piece of software. A piece of software is not a strategy. So if you don't have the right strategy in place, if you don't have the right people in place and the processes, you're not going to be successful just by buying an ABM tool. So it's important that you're not looking for that tool to solve a strategy problem that you may have. Second thing, so yes, it's called account-based marketing, but account-based marketing is not just picking target accounts and marketing to those target accounts. There's a whole lot more that goes into it. It's not just, wouldn't it be nice if we had that logo on our website, on our customers page? And far too often, many marketers that are just starting out with this, that's the first step that they make. So we'll get into why that doesn't work well later on. And then third, finally, account-based marketing is not a replacement for your demand generation efforts. You should be doing both in tandem with one another. There's a time and a place for ABM, and there's a time and a place for demand generation. So look at those two as working hand in hand with one another. Very few companies can afford realistically to only do ABM. I speak for myself, but we don't have an incredibly large marketing budget like the SAPs or Adobes of the world have. So we have to balance both of those, and it's important to remember that. Now let's talk about what ABM is. So ABM really at its core is an account-based approach. And what that means is you need to get sales and marketing on the same page. So at the really basic elementary level, that means having the right goals and metrics in place, because if you don't have that conversation with your sales team, nothing else that follows, and really none of what you're doing in a marketing campaign level will really matter if you're not aligned in terms of goals and metrics. It's also then having that target account conversation with them. It should not be a one-sided marketing conversation, and you should be getting their feedback and input on just the accounts that they want to target and why. Again, not trying to just land all of those whales of logos that would be nice to have on your site. There needs to be a little bit more depth to those conversations too. And then also just looking at the types of technologies that you're using. We've all seen that MarTech landscape visual that changes and adds 1,000 more tools every year. So we need to make sure that the tools that we're using on the marketing side fit and play nicely with the tools that sales is using too, and making sure that they're integrated in the right ways. The second thing, so ABM is coordinating your activities really at every stage in the funnel. The way that many of us were used to marketing, and I think some are still marketing today, is using that handoff approach. So marketing does everything that they need to. It's almost like a track relay, and whenever marketing thinks their job is done, then they hand it off to sales. And we now live in a fully digital world where that no longer works. So you need to be talking with your sales team, preferably on a weekly basis, to see what are the types of campaigns that they're running in parallel with yours, so that you can have coordinated outreach together at different stages of the funnel. And then finally, working in tandem with your demand generation efforts. So like I mentioned before, it is important to do both of these. I look at them as kind of a two-person like superpower team. And there's a time and a place for ABM. You typically will dedicate specific resources and budgets and programs to that. And we look at that at Metadata as an account-based funnel. And then also in tandem, we're running our volume-based funnel, which is where we're focusing our traditional demand generation programs and dollars behind. So use both of them in tandem with one another.
Yeah, Mark, I agree, especially on that first one. At Intellimise, we actually meet at the beginning of every quarter with our sales team and go literally line by line down our target accounts list just to make sure there's no surprises on either end for either of us. And if anything changes during the quarter and we want to add or remove any accounts during the quarter, sales knows about every last one of those additions or removals. And the reason for this is that I, as a marketer, don't want to be putting all that effort into trying to market to a target account that if they did, come through and want a demo, that our sales team wouldn't be super excited to hear from them. So I want them to have that interest, and that's why we keep that alignment really tight throughout the quarter. And speaking of all those efforts that we as marketers are putting in, I know that in the realm of ABM, we're all told that we need to be doing, be on all these different channels and be doing all these different ABM tactics in order to do ABM justice. And I know Jesse and Mark, we've been talking about this the last couple of weeks about that real sense of overwhelm that we feel like being pulled in all these directions in order to get the best ABM results. And so that's really what's at the heart of this webinar today. Is we wanted for ourselves to be able to focus in a few areas. And so for all of you, we've really narrowed down into 3 areas that when integrated together, they work really well. And we've all seen results to do a lot more effective ABM and to drive more of the ABM accounts to convert. So we're excited to share these areas with you today.
Exactly. And I think the big takeaway for this slide is that, and this probably doesn't even encompass all the different tactics that you could include in your ABM program, but just because they're there doesn't mean you have to do them, and doesn't mean you have to do them all at once. So when you're first starting out, preferably with a pilot, start small, take 2 or 3 of these things, do those well before you start to expand on just how many different tactics you're including, and not trying to create too much complexity right out of the gate. So what we'd like to do during this webinar is we're going to constantly refer back to this framework here, and it will guide us through each of our different parts. But what we'd like to do is just show 3 different steps that will help you generate more pipeline through ABM in 2021. So the first step being building your target list via intent signals. So at the end of the day, how do you figure out who you should be targeting? And Jesse will get more into specifics on that. The second piece, and this is something that when we were preparing for this webinar, Sesame and Jesse and I, we feel like we consistently hear, and I hear when listening to chorus calls too, is how do you make intent data actionable? So now that you know who to target with your intent data, what do you do with it? It's a very foreign concept to many people, including myself when I was trying to use intent data for the first time last year. And then the third piece being, once you've figured out who you should be targeting with intent signals, you've targeted them with the right ad, they've clicked through the ad and they've got to your website or landing page. How do you personalize that web experience for each ABM visitor that you get onto your site? So now I'm going to kick it over to Jesse so he can get into the specifics on building target lists with intent signals.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So let's just start off with kind of defining what intent data actually is. And we're going to try and keep this nice and sweet just because it is kind of a controversial topic and it is, fairly new. But To put it like simple again, intent data is information collected on a web user's observed behavior. And this is specifically their web content consumption. What are they viewing? What are they engaging with? What are they posting about? And then ultimately this provides insights into basically their intended interests. And, this insight often indicates whether, they're interested in a potential product or a service, or, maybe they saw some ad that influenced them in one specific way that led them to act on some other signal. We basically can see who is inching closer to the actual buying decision, but then also who is researching prospective technologies, if in that specific domain. So basically across, all these individual, channels or methods or mediums, we basically have two different types of intent data. And the first one we're going to be talking about is first party intent data. First party intent data, it's nothing new. It often comes with your tracking underneath your website, and it's previously been called referred to as engagement data. Many marketing automation platforms already have first party data, intent data already underneath the hood, so you don't really have to worry about it. And most marketers have access. But first data can also be, anonymous, meaning there's no associated contact with the record or account with the record, or it can be known, which means, hey, this account that popped up already existed. Maybe there's, some other intentions to uncover here with this, their history of, digital records. So then we look at third-party intent data. This is, like I said, much newer category. While marketing automation and your website itself tracks, web properties, third-party intent data actually provides and tracks pretty much everything else. So, for example, third-party intent providers, they collect thousands and thousands of individual signals, and then they go through sometimes a data co-op, or sometimes it can be a specific, review site like G2 Crowd, or formerly known as G2 Crowd, now G2.com. IP lookup tools like Clearbit, publication websites like Forbes. There's a bunch of third-party kind of data sources to really pull from, and it's up to you as a marketer to find, hey, which of these are relevant to my audience, and which ones can I, implement in my marketing strategy. And so the point is that, using intent data can be a great starting point when you're thinking about your ABM strategy. Finding accounts or companies that are already researching or engaged in your market can save you tons of time, money, and then obviously drastically increase your conversion rates at the end of the day. So yeah, I think, in terms of intent data, we've talked a lot about this. Mark, I'd love to talk on the next slide about kind of, how to use intent data to actually build that list. And so that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to use that intent data to build out our target accounts that already show active interest in buying behaviors. And so working, in that intent data with your ABM strategy allows you to personalize your approach even more. You have obviously insights into what content is valuable for those accounts, but then you can take that knowledge and then deliver it with your follow-up approach. You can also prioritize, accounts based off of higher intent scores. So if you see that an account is, hitting one specific page or on your website a lot, or they're, coming back to look at reviews on your profile on a review website, those are pretty high intent signals that they're either looking at your technologies to buy or just doing general research. That's something you'd want to prioritize, in your ABM strategy. So again, if I know a handful of accounts that have been viewing my reviews and they've came back multiple times, I can safely assume, as a marketer, that putting those accounts at the top of my ABM list will make my life a lot easier, later down the road. But yeah, Sesame and Mark, I'm done rambling there. But I have two questions, or I have actually one question for both of you. How do you guys go about building, your target account lists?
Yeah, I'll jump in there, Jesse. So I definitely agree. Our approach at Intellimise is the same, where that intent data really does form the foundation of your target accounts list, and that definitely makes sense. The other factors that I primarily look for, one is technographic data. I look at whether every account on the list is currently using a competitive tool, and therefore I can assume that they may be experiencing certain challenges and pain points that I know Intellimise can address. And so therefore I can use that information in my marketing to appeal to those possible pain points. The other thing, the other criteria I look for is I need to confirm that for every account on that list that I have a current customer logo or case study or relevant success metric that particular target account would care about and feel like it resonates with them. If I don't have a like supporting metric or case study, it's going to be a lot harder to appeal to them and make them feel like we can address their use cases and move the metrics that they care about.
Love it.
And then
love it.
to add on to what Sesame said, and to give away a little bit of the secret sauce, you can get really creative too, and you can find ways that may be more unique to your business. So what we do at Metadata is we look at of our initial account list, where are those people or companies advertising? Are they advertising on LinkedIn? Are they advertising on Facebook? How much advertising are they doing on both of those? A lot of that is publicly available information. And then we use that as a way to segment that list and see which of our value props are strongest with particular segments. And then the other thing that I would say is it's a somewhat humbling process, because you think at first that you've got the 100% perfect target account list until you go to your sales team and they look at it and they're like, you know what? We don't feel good about those. We feel good about these. So don't get discouraged when, the first or second time when you think you've got this perfect target account list, that you have to go back to the drawing board and make some more updates. One question that I did want to talk through, and someone had asked this, and it's a really good question. How big does your overall target account list generally need to be in order to actually leverage third-party intent data? And Jesse, I'll let you start, and then I can add on to this too.
Yeah, this is a good one. This is one we hear a lot as well. I know Metadata, just being customers, you also have, your requirements there, but obviously the larger the better. It also depends on kind of the enrichment process that you go for basically those buyer intent signals. So say it's a major enterprise account that comes across, one intent signal, and you're like, hey, we want to go, sell to this company, introduce them to our ABM strategy. It's kind of up to you to decide, hey, how many people within this company, are deemed relevant. And then I think that itself, the actual company size will, be kind of the main criteria there. And then obviously the total number of accounts, but I always shoot for at least 500. I mean, that's kind of where we see like the best results, but Mark, I know you're much closer to this, so I'll throw it your way.
Yeah, I think it depends on a couple of different things. One is if we'll use Bombora and other tools as an example. If they have intent topics, you're kind of dependent on how many accounts are searching or consuming content around those particular topics. And you can act on that intent data with very few accounts. But when it comes to advertising and truly making that intent data actionable, that's when you have to start to layer on your audiences and the number of people with the right titles and seniority and different functions at a company. And you have to grow that in order to meet the minimum audience requirements that a LinkedIn has or a Facebook has. So to Jesse's point, the larger the initial account list, the better. So you don't run into issues with being able to advertise to those accounts on Facebook or LinkedIn or other channels.
Love it. Love it. Awesome. Mark, let's hand it back over to you for making that intent data actionable.
Perfect. So I did not want to bother Sesame's designer too much, so I Photoshopped this myself. We'll get to that in a second. But one of the things that we hear is you now have intent data, but what do you do with it now? Intent data has been around for the last couple of years, but I think it's gaining more and more traction, or at least just popularity. So people who may not be familiar with using it have heard it enough that they think that they should be doing something with it and just don't know what to do with it. That can be difficult. That can be intimidating, and you probably may have questions about what you should be doing with it. How do you make it actionable? And then the world that I was previously living in, which is CSV files and constantly having to export different account lists or intent topics into the tool that you were using. And when you're doing that, aside from having the million other responsibilities that we as marketers have, it becomes very easy for that intent data to become stale and out of date if you're not constantly, updating them, whether it's daily or weekly or monthly. And that's a huge time suck. And it's not realistic to think that you can continue to upload CSV files for your campaigns to make sure that you're targeting people who may be in market. So to Jesse and Sesame, how have you started to make intent data more actionable, both at Intellimise and G2?
You want to go first, Jesse, or?
It's up to you. I'll follow your lead if you want.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so I think a lot of companies are going through this, and we're definitely in the same boat where we've been trying to figure out how to make it actionable for a while now. And I think we finally figured out a good method that we're actually getting a lot more impact. So what we're doing is we do use G2 intent signals at Intellimise, and we have set up a shared Slack channel now, and all of our team members are in it, and we can see the signals. They're integrated, and we see them come through in real time. And we have it filtered too, so that we're only seeing signals that are more or less in our ICP, and many of which are on our target accounts list as well. So we're getting these real-time signals, and we're seeing that these accounts have intent. They're researching products like ours, or our product in particular. And besides just looking at that as a data point, we're also combining that with looking at, are these accounts also coming to our website? Have they recently been on our website? Have they recently engaged with us on social? Have they recently been engaging with our email and opening them and clicking them and reading our content? And so we don't just look at the intent signal, but we combine that with all those other data points that I just mentioned. And then we have a list of much more ready accounts where we feel like, okay, they would much more likely raise their hand quickly, like if we reached out to them. So then we reach out to that group of accounts with a multi-step email cadence. And this has, by far proven to be much more effective method than feeling like we have to follow up on every last signal, or else the world's going to end. So definitely, narrowing it down to those that we feel are much more ready to talk now, and our results just have gone through the roof doing it that way.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I would say we do a few different things on our end with kind of making the intent signals a little bit more literal. First one, I think, just being the data enrichment. We'll basically see, hey, how many contacts do we have on this account? Do we have coverage, or do we need to utilize, one of our lead generation tools or email databases like ZoomInfo or Seamless or Wizard, one of those. And so basically that itself, will give us more insight and coverage into that account. So I think that's the first one we do. I know you talked there about the Slack channel. We do a similar thing, but with email alerts that basically go out to the account owner. That itself is pretty, efficient. For our lead scoring model, we have basically our buyer intent signals have like a higher weight itself. So that obviously goes a long way, but also just immediately plugging any intent signals that we have immediately into metadata. It's just kind of the easiest way that we found, to find success. Again, going back to Mark with this CSV and this picture, I swear it's actually my face and they just photoshopped him on it. But I totally, the metadata at G2, there's a lot there kind of coming down the pipe. But it just makes our lives easier in terms of getting it immediately into our systems, into our instance, and getting campaigns running.
Awesome. So I'd say just a little out over a month from now, we're actually going to be releasing a new integration with G2 that we're really excited about. And the whole reason behind that is to make using intent data, one, make it easier to use, and two, make it easier to make that intent data more actionable. So what you'll be able to do through using metadata and G2 buyer intent is you can then build audiences in metadata that are constantly looking every 24 hours at intent signals coming from G2, and having those audiences refresh every 24 hours once you've built them. So for people like Jesse and myself, it in hopefully a lot of ways gets us out of the CSV hamster wheel, which I'm all too familiar with and have been trying to claw out of for months now. So we're really excited about that. But I think it's really important to recognize that just because you have intent data doesn't mean that those are the right people that you want to be advertising to. And in a world where we all had our marketing budget slashed this year, and who knows what they'll be like next year, you can't really afford to spend dollars on people if they're not a good fit for your company. So what we recommend doing is layering on fit on top of those intent data signals and looking at it in two different ways. So one, you can look at it basic firmographic criteria. So are there specific industries that your particular product or service works best in that you only want to be focusing on? Location, is it US, North America? Are you marketing globally? That's important to call out too. And then third, being company size. So you can look at company size in two different ways. In a perfect world, you've got annual revenue, but we know we don't live in a perfect world, and annual revenue is not always available for most private companies. So I typically recommend using headcount, and then that way you can begin to zero in on, not just companies that are showing intent in a particular area that's relevant to you, but also companies that you wanted to be talking to in the first place. And then the second part that we recommend layering on is demographic criteria and specific attributes like job titles and seniority levels that I think we're all very familiar with. But an often overlooked step is any sort of exclusion criteria that you want to use. And I feel like that's where I spend the most of my time when building out additional audiences, because yes, it's important to target the right people, but you also want to make sure that you're not letting people who may have, maybe it's product marketing in their title, or maybe it's field marketing. And for us, that may not be the right person to be talking to at the end of the day. So making sure that you're not putting paid dollars that are, being run with campaigns that are targeting the wrong people. So the best part about this integration, and again, we promise it was not going to be salesy, and it will not be salesy, but you're then able to auto-target buyers that are potentially in market, using the intent data and using these firmographic and demographic attributes, and not having to constantly upload CSV files. So you can target people who are actively looking at your profile, actively looking at reviews, your competitors, the category. You can get really creative. I think that's a perfect segue to Jesse. I know that you guys are a pretty well-oiled machine at this point. So what are some examples of campaigns that people can use that can potentially target and market buyers?
Yeah, no, I didn't want to, reveal too much in the last slide, so I wanted to save it for here. But yeah, honestly, we have a pretty simple approach when it comes to ABM, and we basically break it down into two different silos. The first silos, which basically are accounts that exist in our instance already, basically meaning that there's an opportunity associated with them, or there's some historical context with that actual account. And then the second silo, obviously, being net new accounts or accounts that do not exist in that instance. And so what we do then is we will prioritize basically our ABM budget for those accounts based off of their actual intent signal. So if we know that there is one account researching us a bunch online, basically hitting all of our major signals, all those indicators are going, red flags everywhere. We will typically, allocate a higher budget towards that actual account and the campaign they belong into. And then, if we see that there's somewhat of a weaker signal, but maybe, there's a Hail Mary or a long shot for us to land that account and set it as, a demo, we'll put them in kind of our longer, more, month to month ad nurture campaigns, and they'll go in there until hopefully, they convert and drive more engagement. But yeah.
Awesome.
Thankfully, I want to say the metadata stuff. This used to be tabs and tabs and tabs of spreadsheets, like literally, and now I'm just excited for clicks.
Aren't we all? Awesome. Well, I'm going to kick it over to Sesame now for how to personalize the web experience once you've gotten people to click through on your ads and gotten them onto your site.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Jesse. So yeah, so now it's go time, right? You've worked really hard to drive these prospects to click through on your ads, to drive them to your website. And so you better believe that you're going to have at least one prospect from each of your ABM accounts land on your website at any given point to check you out. And so you really want to be ready for them. But unfortunately, our websites are usually not ready for these ABM accounts when they land there. And what I mean is your websites are not recognizing these ABM visitors and not treating them any differently than other visitors that are coming to your site. And the reason for this is that a lot of websites are static. They use the same messaging, the same content, the same CTA buttons, really the same everything. And they show the same everything to every last visitor, no matter if they're from an ABM account or if they're a return visitor, or even if they're a current customer of yours. And I really believe that this is a really big, huge missed opportunity, especially in B2B. I mean, the purpose of your website is to convert people at the end of the day. And so I say, what if we completely change the way we look at our websites and our approach to them? And what if we start thinking about our websites as an integral channel in our ABM strategies? And so the best way to do this is to first ensure that your site recognizes your ABM visitors differently. And then second, gives them the most personalized and relevant experience to them. So you already have a lot of data on these accounts, and you could be using that data to treat these people uniquely and therefore keep them on your site longer and keep moving them down the funnel towards your conversion goal. And so let's see what this looks like in application, what this super personalized experience looks like. So here's a sample website. It's actually, you might recognize it as the homepage of airtable.com. But for the purpose of this exercise, it could really just be any website. So, if you know that a visitor is from a target account, you could be doing a lot to personalize their experience with the data you have. And the options are really endless. And I'll talk through a few of those personalization ideas right now. So for starters, up here at the top of the screen, you see the sign up for free blue button. What if you knew that the ABM visitor that was coming to your site, this was their first time on your site? In that case, sign up for free might be too aggressive of a CTA. They might just want some information the first time they're there. So maybe change that button to direct them to one of your product pages instead to learn more about how your product works. That would probably get you a lot more conversions on that button than pushing them just to sign up right out of the gate. Next idea. So up here in the top area, in another situation, what if you had a return visitor from an ABM account to your site? And what if you just boldly wrote up here, instead of the headline that's here already, what if it instead said, welcome back, and totally, caught them off guard right when they came? That would be a much more relevant CTA to them. And it would, delight them as they came back to your website and make them feel much more welcome that they were in the right place. Or also in this area above the fold, what about the situation where back to the topic of ads, if you are driving an ABM account from an ad and they're landing on your site, what if instead of this typical image and headline that everybody sees up here, if instead of showing them that, what if the headline and image you showed them is actually mirrored to the content of the ad that they click through on and that compelled them to begin with? That would be a much more relevant message and image, and it would make them feel like they're the exact right place they should be, and they'd probably keep clicking through and stay on your site longer. Next, this is one of my favorite spots of the website, is this pink promo bar here at the top. And right now it has a very static message for every visitor. But going back to the situation of a return ABM account visitor, what if, for instance, they were last on your pricing page, but they never actually signed up for a plan on your pricing page, and you know that about them? What if you use this primary piece of real estate at the top to be the first thing they saw when they came back to your site, and you used it to direct them back to the pricing page where they left off? Down here in the customer logo farm area that we love so much, consider this idea. What if a couple of these logos, instead of them just being random logos, what if a couple of them were actually direct competitors of the target account who's coming to your site, assuming that you do have customers that are competitors of that target account? You could then much better capture their attention, and they would automatically feel like your solution is credible and that other people they know are using your solution as well, and they might get that sense of FOMO too, which could work to your advantage. And then finally, last idea for you, down here in this second content block part of the page, right now it's directing the site traffic to go explore the product. But what if instead we use this area to insert very relevant case studies to the industry of the visiting target account to your site? That would mean that within mere seconds of landing on your site, they would see those case studies and already know that you could probably address their use cases and probably help move success metrics that are important to them. So all of these personalization ideas are IntelliMy's is capable of carrying these out, and many others as well. And we're doing that for a lot of our B2B customers right now as part of their ABM strategy. And in fact, I did hear just the other day from one of our SaaS customers that we helped them drive 133% increase on form fill conversions on their site from their ABM traffic. So that just goes to show you, give you an idea of the level and in the major difference that personalization can make as part of your ABM strategy and carrying that out through your website. So I wanted to bring Jesse and Mark back into the conversation now. And I wanted to ask both of you guys, what are you two doing at your companies to ensure that you're converting your ABM accounts once they hit your site?
Yeah, we do a few different things. And again, it's all talking about what you were referring to there of, trying to personalize the experience, trying to build, some consistent theme that goes throughout the entire buyer's journey almost. And that's what we kind of really try and hone in on. An example of that we do is like hyper personalizing our chatbots from an ABM campaign. So if we see, hey, this person, this contact is at this account, they came in through this ABM campaign, we need to tailor that chatbot to them. Kind of in parallel with that, if we know that contact that's hitting came through a specific ABM campaign, and we understand that there's a little bit more intent behind their overall, actions to visit us, offering, a gift card for a demo upon, with an exit intent lightbox when they're going to leave the page, something to really kind of capture them, get them to that next stage of, the buyer's journey. But then also in parallel, past the point of conversion, there's a lot you can do. If you want to fast lane your ABM, like converted contacts directly to AE's calendars, try and decrease that average sales cycle, that lead to opportunity time, if you will. So that's one thing is, they're already prioritized in our system. Why give them another extra step of, having to schedule a meeting with a BDR? And then also one other thing that we do is driving in-app personalization. So, if you have a web app out there that, or a product-led business where people are constantly logging in, drive some more personalization through, whatever platform you have underneath the hood for an in-app experience, whether that's, app queues or Pindo, but just basically build that consistency from, the actual ABM effort all the way to that next point of conversion. But yeah, Mark, what about you?
I'm a big fan of the crawl, walk, run analogy. And as part of a 2-person marketing team at Metadata, when it comes to some of the on-site personalization things that we've talked about here, we're, I would say, like the toddler that's stumbling and is trying to get its legs underneath them and just about to stand up and start walking. So we're just beginning to personalize some on-site elements here. One of the things that we do, and it's really easy, is once you've landed on that target account list, we use Drift. So what we've done is we've uploaded that to Salesforce, tagged them as target accounts using a few different custom fields. And then you can trigger different Drift playbooks that give them a more tailored custom experience, just knowing the fact that they're one of your target ABM accounts.
Yeah. And I would also say on the chatbot saying like, definitely, personalize inside of the chatbots. But another idea for you, what if you personalize which chatbot they got in the first place? And so you wouldn't have to ask them like a first question or two to know who they are, to know what the rest of that conversation on the chatbot would be. Instead, you would identify them immediately and serve them that right chatbot that would pick up where they left off last time they were on your site. So just another idea with chatbots. Cool.
Awesome. So before we jump into Q&A, and while we're running through this slide, feel free to send over some questions if you have any through the chat. We'd love to get to those. But we wanted to make this actionable for everybody without being salesy too. So there are 3 different steps in that framework that we had talked about. Jesse, I'll kick it over to you first to run through yours.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I think to just put it short again, the best companies to target are the ones that are already researching you. Why do extra work? Why do extra, drive extra spend in terms of educating prospects when, you already have some there that are they're just cloaked. They're there but they're just cloaked. And then also one other one that we didn't really talk about, but use, intent signals to kind of grade your ABM. For G2, for example, are they coming back to my category to research prospective technologies? Are they visiting my page? It kind of can give you that benchmark check of, hey, I'm actually influencing these accounts, a little bit more and getting them again towards that next step in the buyer's journey.
Awesome. When it comes to making intent data actionable, I think the two big takeaways for me are, one, all intent data is not created equal. It's really important to recognize the different types of intent data and those types of intent signals and what one signal may mean versus the other. And then two, just layering on fit on top of that. So some of those demographic attributes that we had talked about and the firmographic attributes too. And then the second piece being just because someone's showing intent doesn't mean that you need to push a demo request ad on them immediately. Depending on what they're doing, that might make sense. But what I would encourage you to do is to test out different offers and campaigns that are not demo requests. So you can start to see which campaigns people are responding to better than others.
Yeah, and then for mine, on personalizing the web experience, again, it's just really important to recognize our ABM visitors. They're in our ABM program to begin with. They're special. We want them to convert. So use your website to treat them differently, give them that unique experience, and move them through that funnel to converting them. And I'll leave it at that.
Awesome. So you've got looks like two questions that are already in right now. So the first one, I'll throw this over to Jesse, but I've heard of passive intent and active intent. How should I look at these differently for ABM?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think to start off, you'd want to think of like, with your lead scoring model, you have, active behaviors and passive behaviors. Passive behaviors could be an email open click or someone, visiting the careers page or whatever. But active intent would be, hey, this person, this account visited the request demo page. It's kind of the same thing with actual buyer intent, those type of intent signals. So like, for example, if your company shares a name with another company, there's a chance that you can get like basically the wrong intent signal coming from that. If you offer multiple product lines and you offer one that goes to finance and say you have another product that goes to sales, there could be some cross, intent signals that come from there. So again, we want to kind of think about the holistic approach of what is my actual market positioning and who is coming back to us. Again, going back to fit, So I think that's what you'd have to evaluate. But those active intent, signals would be someone repeatedly going to your page, like we had talked about, and then they're viewing multiple clicks on your page. Maybe they're going to a review page or a product page. But maybe they're taking even further steps and reaching out through contact, but never fully meeting that step. Again, this is all based off of the actual grade of that intent signal. How heavy is that?
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Here's another one. This is good because it's always, again, a controversial one, but how do you measure, effectiveness of overall ABM?
I'll jump in on that one. So at Intellimise, it really to us comes down to tracking the number of ABM target accounts on the list that have actually requested a demo and want to talk to our sales team. And we track that number, but we also track, we take one step further and track the number of these leads that have taken the next step to actually schedule that first meeting on the calendar with us. And so this number usually is more important to sales, but it's just as important to me as the marketer because it shows how well in our marketing we've been able to drive a sense of urgency to that target account. Intellimise is helping drive more leads into the funnel, more revenue for companies through their websites. And so how well have we articulated that in our marketing to make that target account feel like I got to talk to them now, like this is impacting my funnel and my metrics. Mm-hmm. Beyond that, we also look at which sources in our ABM program, so which touch points are producing more of these sales conversations. So ultimately, most of these hand raisers come through our website. Most of these target accounts convert through our website, but we track back which source drove them there to begin with so that we can be a lot smarter and strategic about our program budget allocation when we're looking at the next quarter. What about you, Mark?
Yeah, so I think we look at this in two different ways. One is what we're doing working? And that's like very top of funnel. It could be what you focus on when you're just starting out, but you can look at, like, you can get lost in Google Analytics. There's so much good data in there that I think goes underutilized. So when you're running campaigns that are targeting these accounts, what are they doing on your website? How long are they staying on your website? What types of pages are they looking at? You can get a whole lot of value just out of GA, so you don't really need a super fancy, analytics tool to tell you that. And then when it comes to more of like the business outcomes, we look at, let's say, velocity in particular, and how quickly that sales cycle is from the initial inquiry all the way through to hopefully close one, not close loss. And then also looking at average deal size too. So if they truly are the right fits and you feel good about that, how does that average deal size compare to some of these non-target accounts? You would hope that if they are the right fit for you, that they would be noticeably larger. So it's important to look at those two things too. What about you guys, Jesse?
Yeah, that's a good question. This is something we've changed up a few times over the past, I'd say, like year. But realistically, like what we're looking at now, the moneymaker pipeline sourced, that's kind of what we look at, through it's our main metric for ABM. We also look at, pipeline influenced. If we, say we have a specific ABM campaign that's, trying to drive an upsell or renewal. So we'll look at, often that pipeline influence, just because it's not directly, being sourced from that. And then, in parallel with that, we're also looking at average sales cycle time. And then, basically how long does it take from this lead to come in from this ad to, they signed on the dotted line. And that really gives us kind of a gauge of how effective we're, handling those ABM contacts. Are they going quicker than our demo requests? Like, are they being expedited, at the rate we'd like to, have them at, just because, they are a higher priority given their previous intent. So that's one thing. And then also just seeing, the lead to kind of opportunity phase as well, taking that average sales cycle time down a little bit more granular, how quick is it getting out of marketing's hands?
Awesome. Well, this has been a fantastic time with you too, Jesse and Mark. I really enjoyed the conversation. We are out of time, and I know we have more questions. We'll get to those after the webinar. So thank you everyone for those and for being a great audience today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sesame. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you both. This was good.
Yeah, and we'll send out the recording to everyone afterwards. Have a great day.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.